Hello and welcome to our panel. My name is Andrea Sinus, NXUnite team member at Nexus Marketing, and your moderator for today's panel. Today's panel topic is healthcare technology selection, building your tech stack. As usual, before I introduce our panelists and we jump into this fascinating topic, I do have some logistics to cover. NXUnite by Nexus Marketing serves as a powerful community resource designed to foster connections and facilitate lasting relationships within the mission-driven sector. On NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, and cause-driven podcasts. NXUnite also hosts webinars, demos, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks with me today. Today's 45-minute long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our lovely audience. At any time during the panel, please feel free to submit your questions via the chat. We will spend the second portion of the panel addressing as many as we possibly can. Finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I do want to thank you all for attending this panel. We are very excited to be in touch with you, the mission-driven community. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today and to learn from these outstanding experts who I will now finally introduce. First, we have Mehmet Kazgan, CEO and founder at Klieska. With a background spanning healthcare, IT, entrepreneurship, and patient engagement, Mehmet has led Klieska to become a recognized innovator in streamlining care delivery through configurable mobile-first health solutions. He's passionate about building scalable technology infrastructures that bridge the gap between patients and providers, and he regularly speaks on topics including digital health strategy, value-based care, and health tech adoption. Mehmet, it's great having you here.
Thanks, Andrea. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Up next, we have Miki Allen, co-founder and CTO at J2 Interactive. Miki has been the lead architect and developer on many of J2's biggest and most challenging projects, delivering customized solutions for health information exchange, interoperability, population health, analytics, and patient engagement. He has extensive knowledge and expertise in web applications, XML, databases, and various healthcare standards and platforms such as HealthShare, Epic, Cerner, and HL7. Miki is passionate about leveraging technology to improve healthcare delivery, outcomes, and experience for providers and patients alike. Miki, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Andrea. Very happy to be here.
Also with us today is Yossi Abram, President and CEO at Zappix. Yossi leads a dynamic team that provides AI-powered digital customer engagement solutions to various industries and markets. With over 20 years of experience in the IT and telecom sectors, he has proven track record of driving growth, innovation, and customer satisfaction. Great to have you back, Yossi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
And last but not the least, we are joined by Zach Tisch, partner for portfolio services at Pivot Point Consulting. Zach is focused on helping healthcare provider, payer, and life sciences organizations leverage technology to drive improved outcomes in patient care, business operations, and patient or provider satisfaction. During his over 20-year career in healthcare IT, Zach has helped organizations such as Stanford, MD Anderson Cancer Center, UCLA Health, and a number of other leading healthcare organizations transform their patient care and provider journeys through the combination of people, process, and technology. Zach, we're excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Pleased to join the panel and discussion today.
All right. Well, Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. And now we are going to kick off with our first question for the day. When we talk about building a tech stack, excuse me, what core components should every modern healthcare provider have in place today? And Mehmet, I'll have you start us off with this one.
Yeah, I think those are my three core values that I actually follow when we build and we kind of help the customers as well. I want to make sure that it's maintainable, second, sustainable, and three, scalable. Those are the three things that we follow.
Thank you, Mehmet. Mickey, anything to add to what Mehmet started us off with?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are three great things to consider. I would add, and kind of coming from my own perspective, interoperability and the ability to extend the tech stack, right? So you always start out with a baseline of functionality, but you don't know what you're going to need in the future. So you want to make sure you're extensible.
Thank you, Mickey. Yossi, anything that you'd like to add here?
I think I would add also a different view a bit of moving from specific standalone tools to a real workflow and orchestration. And what you need to see is really how all of those tools connected together, being orchestrated and providing the best service, both for the providers and for the patients together.
And finally, Zach, any final thoughts to what they've shared so far?
The only thing I would add is, I think the challenge is to pick something that's going to work for you today, but that will also work 2 or 3 years from now, right? And if we look back at where things were in our industry, even just 12 or 18 months ago, they were radically different. So it's absolutely a challenge, but we encourage organizations to maybe look back at when they moved from paper medical records to an electronic medical record and think about it like that kind of a complete organizational transition, and to not pick something that maybe meets your needs for the first year, but is not going to grow to the points of my fellow panelists of being that true interoperable workflow orchestration foundation that you really need to be successful both today and moving forward.
Thank you so much, Zach. Okay, we're off to a great start. And now delving into a technical aspect. What is the most common mistake healthcare organizations make when implementing a new digital tool, and how can it be avoided? Yossi, I'll let you start us off.
I think you need to look at it not from a vendor tool, but more as what is the patient journey. And if you look at it from the patient point of view and the patient journey throughout the entire workflow, from discovery, scheduling, intake, care, follow-up, then you can choose the appropriate technology and the appropriate workflows to support all of that. So start from that and then choose the best tools that are out there in order to accomplish the best outcome for both for the healthcare provider and for the patients.
Well, good point about the patient journey there, Yossi. Zach, anything to include with basically what Yossi just said?
Yeah, I think having a framework and governance is really important as you make decisions. I was actually just talking to an organization earlier today, and they said, we've had people getting really excited about all these AI different tools that are available. We did a poll, and there's 12 different products being used within our organization, right? And so while some of those are really great ideas, they're also not taking advantage of economies of scale or being able to teach or learn or document because they're using disparate tools. So I think sometimes you can move so fast now, which is really exciting and encouraging, but we often tell people, slow down, put some of those rules of the road in place, make sure that you're talking, sharing, and that the energy that you're getting the most value out of the energy that you're putting towards this. I think it's really, right now, there's a lot of excitement that doesn't necessarily turn into long-term outcomes. And, especially where reimbursements are with health systems today, they can't afford to not see those outcomes returned to them very quickly.
Thanks, Zach. What about you, Mehmet? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, before I was running my own company, starting it, I was on the other side of the world, making sure we're actually getting the right tools in place. The biggest mistake that I think I'm seeing my customers are doing today is they're not really looking at what current stack look like today. So is there a way that we can leverage an existing system instead of keep buying point solutions? That's kind of like the kind of points that I made in the beginning, that you need to build something and you need to kind of build that framework with the tools you're getting that can be sustainable. So if I keep buying or implementing or developing even in-house like tools that without leveraging other technologies that you have in place. And we usually do that, right? We have a cell phone, we have a lot of apps in it. We don't even look what the other options we might have. So we usually either go with the straight marketing options to what have been presented to us, and we just kind of go with it because it's the best easy option. But optimal solution is about understanding what you have, whether the weaknesses or limitations, restrictions that current tools have, maybe unbox them, look at them, and then start building the white spaces around it and get the new solution in place. So I would say one of the many that I am seeing the biggest mistakes are like not understanding what those tools are doing today, yet we want to replace or we want to get another new point solution that will increase the maintenance and the other, I would say, governance issues in the future. That's how I would say with one of the biggest ones that I've seen so far.
Thanks for the reminder there, Mehmet. Mickey, final thoughts for this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I would add is, healthcare today, has a lot of data silos, right? I mean, it's not, we have tremendous amount of data, right? But, a lot of it is siloed and not available in the context of care, right? When it needs to be. So I think when you're looking at a common mistake we see is very much when somebody sees a new tool and they want to solve a problem, they don't necessarily factor in, how does the data that tool needs, how does it get into the tool, how does it get out of the tool? So really thinking about it from the standpoint of systemic data flow across their entire organization and making sure they're not creating just another data silo that is going to be a barrier for adoption. I think that's important.
Well, thanks for the insights, everyone. Zach will have you start us off with the next question. Now, there is a big push right now for new national standards and how healthcare data is structured. How should leaders evaluate new technology to ensure it actually aligns with these evolving standards?
Yeah, great question. One of the things that we often, counsel clients on is, one of the ways that you can really enforce for having your vendors manage to those standards is, when you're making your purchases, right? So put those things in your contracts, have SLAs and penalties tied to them, and make sure that you're auditing regularly, that you're getting that documentation from your vendors, and also that you're working with vendors and partners that aren't just meeting the minimal standards, but ideally that are participating in the national standards committees that are helping to drive it forward. And I think this is very much an area where kind of we as the industry, I think, need to push it forward. I think healthcare is so complex. There's so many silos, to Mickey's point. It's hard for an external regulator, I think, to give us the best path forward, right? And so we need to make that ourselves, and it is only as good as we hold each other accountable. And often the best vehicle for that is contracts, and when purchasing and purchase order time comes around.
Thanks for starting us off, Zach. Yossi, how should leaders evaluate new tech?
So again, I'm going back to the patient side. So I'm also looking at it from a different angle, which is digital equity, because we're talking a lot here about digital tools, but digital is almost like a spectrum of people that are very digital to those that are not digital. So when we're choosing the right tools, and as a CEO of a digital engagement company, but still even there, we are looking at the entire the spectrum of the patients, and it can be people that are very, very digital savvy, and they can use an app and everything. But there are others that you want to try to make it as simple as possible for them. as low friction as possible, maybe using more voice channels rather than portals and logins and passwords and so on. So it really is also about the digital equity when we're talking about tools.
Well, good point regarding digital equity, Yossi. Mickey, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Zach said, the standards are only as good as the vendor's adoption, right, and their willingness to sort of go beyond the technical sort of design and get into the spirit of interoperability, right? The whole purpose of having standards is to make the data available to everyone, right? And there are, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of standards in that time, and the reality is there isn't just one standard, at any point, right? I mean, when I started working in healthcare IT, HL7 was the primary interoperability standard. Guess what? It's still around today, right? So we've got there's a lot of promise with FHIR and USCDI and some of the new standards that are coming out and that are being endorsed by CMS and ONC. I think that we're moving in the right direction, but I think it only works if people are really committed to having a truly interoperable solution that can exchange data regardless of what the endpoints are.
Thanks, Mickey. Matt, thoughts to wrap this question up?
Yeah, when we actually talk about our technology to our customers, we just build empathy, right? So what do they what do they need? What are the problems they're trying to solve? And we usually start with telling them we're not here to replace workflows, systems, or people. Especially with AI, people are scared of people replacements, and then we're going to change something in place, which are highly relevant to what I've already told you about the kind of like what tools we have in place. So the number one thing as an entity when they evaluate is to understand first what the problem they're trying to solve. It's not the technology. It's think about the technology as a tool to use it. You need to make a hole on the wall. You just need a hole. You can discuss and think about, can I use like a little needle to make a hole? Do I need a drill, or just need the hole itself? Should I just buy a hole somewhere else? So it's really important to understand what they need for what. So it's kind of like starting with the problem and assign stakeholders to be accountable, which one of the panels already talked about. So every problem actually touch into a system and a workflow that are associated, so they have relevancies to it. So assign those stakeholders to actually speak up and representative of how much they actually collaborate or cooperate to that specific problem. The next is kind of understanding the clinical impact in healthcare specifically. Why do we need that? We kind of understand the problem and what kind of impact once we have this solution in place. And again, don't think about the technology tool, but the impact that it's going to make. And usually understanding how can I make that really readily available without changing our current workflows, because you need to adopt the system pretty quickly without scaring people off. It should be very smooth and convenient for people, other people also interfacing with the technology as well. And obviously the last one that we kind of talk about is financially, is it really worth to make that investment? When we talk about the investment, we're talking about our banks. Do we have the budget? I'm not talking even about that. Do we have the people in place that can optimally help deploy, implement, and get it kind of adapted to the level that we can solve the problem? Yet the tool might be super cheap to buy, or it's under the budget, it's fitting the budget, what have you. But if it's causing you much more time to implement and enable and getting it adopted, it might be actually way more costly. So financial way of identifying with the first three would be the way that I would look at evaluating any type of not only technology, but any type of new system, a new workflow, even the people that you're adding to the team. So
Thanks, Mickey, and thank you, everyone. Lots of key takeaways from those answers in itself. Well, all right. This is the last of the questions I'm going to ask before opening it up to our wonderful audience. So this would be a great time to get those questions in, so we can try to address as many as possible. We've also received some pre-panel survey questions that we will address later on, in case no one has sent off any questions in the chat. All right. So one important question that I guess a lot of healthcare organizations would ask: how do we balance automated self-service tools with the need for personalized human-to-human care? Mickey, I'll have you start with this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very pertinent question right now, right? I would guess I would start by saying, automation shouldn't replace the human care, right? I think it really is there to elevate it and augment it, right? And I think in order to do that, you have to have sort of the ability to pass context seamlessly between sort of the automated interaction and the human interaction, right? So that when you go from an automated process to the human-centric process, that person has access to all of the data that was collected as part of that, and then when you're then completing your handoff and going back into an automated process, it seamlessly picks up from that point. So I think it's tricky to get that right, but I think that's the goal.
Thank you so much, Mickey. Mehmet, anything to add to what Mickey just mentioned so far?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be a little relevant to what Miki started talking about. So I'm going to throw the AI word in there pretty quick. It's a new thing. Everybody is thinking about getting those things replaced and automate. The way that I talk about this kind of three-step pyramid. So bottom layer is kind of like automation, which is not replacing people. It's more about like automating things for that people can operate more efficiently. Instead of doing 5 things, now we can do 10, or instead of doing 5 things, you can do 3 really well, and you can push the 2 others. So people are the same, right? That's the bottom layer. So we're going to see this happening over the course of maybe, I don't know, another year or two. We're going to use agents and tools to automate things, generating things for us, content organizing, and then building some logic. The second layer is what you're talking about. That's why I wanted to be also relevant. I usually talk about the AI adoption strategy is the personalization. So when you automate something, it's working. Now I need to personalize this, how it's actually automating for Yossi, for Zach, for Mickey, for Andre at the same time. This is where you start adding the human in the loop function. In AI, we talk about a lot. Are we doing the automation right? You need to put, is it really personalized to my needs? So you're kind of like process automation to, I would say, information optimization for Yossi, for Mickey. Are they getting what they need with the data, with the information, with the tools, with the outcomes or outputs? Maybe for patients that we're talking about, like Yossi has been talking about. The last part on the top is the adaptive AI, which is the learning that we talk about. So without having personalization, AI will not actually do things, because deep learning, we talk about looking at the patterns and start using that as an optimization pattern to use and personalize at the same time. So I would say for the AI to the side, whatever tools that we're using, implementing, there's a human factor. And I always tell to my team all the time, the problems are not generated by the tools or technologies. Problems are generated by the humans who are implementing and introducing those tools or maintaining them. So it's the human factor. Personalization is always the case. Either it's your customers directly centered around patients, or providers that you work with, or the executives you're trying to prove the systems are in place. So.
Thank you so much, Mehmet. Lots of nuggets of truth there that we could all apply. What about you, Zach? What are your insights here on how healthcare providers and organizations can use these tools while balancing the human to human care aspect?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, I think there's still a lot of tasks and interactions within the patient's healthcare journey that ultimately have very little impact on their actual care. And when we can segment out those, and especially if you automate them intelligently, it's a win for everybody, and it is very satisfying for the patients as well. Um, and we've actually seen really good feedback from providers that, hey, if you can make it faster for me to do what they may consider some of their administrative time, whether it's documentation capture, billing, reviewing schedules, reading notes, etc., and streamline that for them, then that's more time for direct hands-on patient care. That's more time for clinical decision making, and it's less distraction ultimately. So I think there's the both the I think wonderful opportunity, but also the challenge is there's probably almost an unlimited amount of problems within healthcare we can help solve. But there absolutely are ones where I think automation can come in, definitely will not replace the human and can also help identify those opportunities when the human should intervene. A really great example, we did a project around heart failure patients using a chat bot to just periodically reach out and ask how people are feeling. Based on their answer to that, it would do a little bit more of a conversational back and forth. And then it would often, if they were feeling a little bit worse, get them scheduled to come in or talk to a nurse practitioner on the phone. If we didn't have the AI to do that outreach, the health system never would have had, the staff to be able to do that manually. That interaction would have never happened, and we never would have caught the, decompensating healthcare outcome until the patient got so bad that they may have called in themselves, right? So I think that's a great example, even where it is kind of fulfilling a clinical function, but because it was designed well, it's really high satisfaction for both the clinicians and for the patients ultimately.
Thanks so much, Zach. Yossi, final thoughts here.
I think all, Mehmet, Nikki, and Zach covered it well. And I'll add just one more thing. It is that healthcare industry today is really has a big staffing challenge, and they are really short on both clinical and administrative staff. And when we're looking at automation, when we're looking at AI, we can actually find a lot of tasks, as all three of them are already spoken about, that can reduce a lot of the manual effort from those repetitive, low value add, less empathy needed tasks that can really allow actually a much better handling by humans of the patient. So I would actually flip this and say, here, automation can actually improve the human patient care when it's done correctly. And on the more clinical side, we can also use automation and AI, as Zach said. Think about reaching out to patients for screening, for preventative measures, and so on. So can you use automation instead of having staff picking up the phone and calling or sending out mailers? Let's use automation, let's use segmentation, let's use big data, and so on to do that properly in order to prevent things from happening otherwise.
Thank you all so much. I think in terms of like AI and all of the automated and all of that discussion, there's always a fear that comes within it. And it's a good reminder from everyone, especially like you guys as experts, that these are tools and we shouldn't be afraid to use them. And it's how we're going to move across and move forward with it. Okay, so the moment I'm sure many of you are waiting for, which is our Q&A portion. A reminder, you can continue to send in questions as we go through. We will work on answering as many as we can. Again, we also have a few questions from our pre-panel survey that we sent out, and we can go ahead and do those before, right after this audience question that I see from Philip. Philip said, to what extent is AI influencing the progress of data interoperability? And anyone can answer this and jump in if y'all have any insights here.
I mean, I would say that there are a couple of things we're seeing, right? One of the biggest influences from interoperability is that there's still, like I talked about data silos, but there's a lot of healthcare data that is unstructured, right? Progress notes, care plans, things that are basically just written documents that are exchanged through PDF or faxed even today still, right? I think AI gives us a way of taking that unstructured data and extracting real meaning from it and turning it into structured data, in a way that, the solutions that were existed prior to AI, they just were not sufficient, right? So that's a very exciting thing. It actually opens up this whole, set of data that exists out there that before was very opaque to a lot of these processes, and now can be part of those. The other thing we're seeing is just like any coding process, right? The interoperability and building interfaces, right, and transforming data, right, is a coding task at some level, and AI makes that more streamlined. So you're just more efficient in doing that, and being more efficient allows you to be more expansive and bring data in from more data sources. And the more data you have, especially if you have smart tools that know how to mine that data, the better view we have of the patient's record, and therefore it impacts the quality of care you can provide.
All right. Thank you so much, Mickey. Anyone else who wants to jump in and add more thoughts to that?
I can add some notes on it too. From my perspective, I'll give more like a clinical application, a little bit deeper than just the data itself that we have been using in different formats, and then how we enable it. So I usually talk about data that matters, right? You will see as the AI is becoming more and more adopted, the more money is going to go into the cloud infrastructures and data aggregators, right? And then obviously the infrastructures that will be using transactional value. AI operates on a transaction, right? So it just thinks about something, and that thinking is a dollar sign for somebody who's actually operating on it. So I think we already are seeing this in different ways. We're operating in four different cloud infrastructures. The pricing is changing from one to another, depending on how you put things together, specifically for interoperability. So let's take this in a usability standpoint, how a clinician will get information using interoperability. And I'll tie this up what data matters. If I'm a clinician, which I am, I used to own my own clinic as well. And then if I'm going to prescribe a patient opioids, depending on which state I'm at and what kind of prescription the patient has been using already, is one thing. But knowing that patient has been already refilling is another layer of knowing more information about the patient. So interoperability will open up doors to get information. For that, you don't necessarily need AI unless you're using agents to automate things and getting indexed information before. But it's more important from our standpoint is give me the information when I need it and how I need it. So just give me the information for a patient who has refilled their prescriptions twice already within a week instead of 2 months, and then kind of pair that information with the lab data, and then give me that information instead of get all the data, let me look what's going on. So build an engine that meets the criteria for you, which we talk about personalization as well, right? A nutritionist or pediatrician will look at the same data set differently than a psychiatrist in complex cases that we see every day. So AI is really playing a big role to kind of reverse engineering the model and giving you what you think is the best picture to paint for you, for the patient at point of time. That's kind of like, I would say, putting data interoperability for clinicians on steroids, to answer that question. So I will just add a different flavor to answer that.
Yeah, and the only
Thanks so
other
much,
thing
Milan.
I would add to that
Yeah, go
real
ahead.
briefly too, and this is I think a little bit farther out, but exciting that I think we're certainly seeing some good advances here in the research space, and that's really call it like kind of predictive medicine through AI, right? So if I'm looking at a patient and I might take 3 different therapeutic routes, what would be the likely outcome of those routes, and start to do some of that scenario and game planning. We're certainly seeing that in clinical trials and areas like precision medicine and genetic and genomic medicine. And I think a lot of those learnings are ultimately going to, trickle down to the kind of the general care bedside. And there's going to be a less of, well, let's try this medicine, see how it goes for a couple of days. And then depending on, how your numbers look, we may or may not switch to this other one. We'll be able to model that out based on that patient's personalized genetic profile and have a pretty good idea of what's going to actually be the better option for them, which can have, huge benefits, obviously, on patient care, but also just on cost reduction, reducing hospital stays, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of exciting kind of foundational work being done now that can help us progress into that maybe over the next decade.
And I will add just one more thing, is that AI shows us the potential of a lot of different use cases, but we really need the interoperability, especially with the EMRs, and we know how close some of the larger or the largest EMR is about the data. And I think it also goes back to one of the earlier questions about compliance and where the regulations coming and so on, because now whoever owns the data has a lot of power. And do you want to keep it in one place, or do you want to open it for the sake of the potential that AI is bringing? So that's probably a whole different discussion, but it's very relevant for AI and interoperability.
Right. Well, Zach mentioned cost reduction, and I think a pre-panel survey question relates to this. How do you accurately measure the ROI of a new platform beyond just looking at the financial cost? What metrics should leaders track to prove a tool is actually working? Again, anyone can just jump in and answer.
So I can start. We look at it as throughput. How many patients can you book, and how many patients actually arrive to the appointment? And we look, when we're looking at patient engagement, is how can you make the patients easily, frictionless book their appointments, and then have a higher booking rate for the practice, for the hospital, and so on. And then how can you help them reduce no-shows? How can you help them reduce missed appointment, late cancellations? And I can give an example is when we're working with several gastroenterology departments in large hospitals, and we help them reduce no-shows by over 50%, from 15% to 7%, from 18% to 9%. And we did that, again, by looking at the patient journey. How can we make it more simple? How can we make it easiest? And whoever had the colonoscopy knows that there are multiple steps and preps, and you forget. But if you give them the right message at the right time, with the right language, at their preferred contact method, you make it personal for them, and you do it 7 days, 5 days, 2 days, then you can really use technology. You can really use automation and the design of the journey to the best results. And that's how we do it today.
I guess I would add to that. I don't think you can measure ROI without looking at adoption, right? Without adoption, you really have no ROI, right? I mean, in an example of that is you could have the best, clinical decision support system out there, but if the clinicians aren't using it, doesn't matter, right? So, similarly on the patient side, you could have the best patient portal available, but if it's one of 5 that the patient has to go to see their data, chances are you're not going to get adoption from that solution. So I think, anytime you want to measure ROI, you have to ask yourself, what's going to reduce friction in terms of people actually using the solution?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, making sure to really measure and stay committed to that utilization. Some people kind of turn a feature on, maybe have success in the first department or with the physicians that are championing it, but maybe forget about, the other 98% of the organization and move on to the next thing and don't maximize really the value that they're getting out of it. And I think lastly too, for adoption, we also know that providers are burnt out, patients are stressed. There's a lot of options where they can go for care. So it's also really important, even if it makes more money, even if it makes the experience faster, is there improved patient and provider satisfaction, and making sure that you have some anchor points in your projects that hit those things. Because ultimately right now it's, kind of the focus is the name of the game, and it's very easy for a patient in any stage of their care journey to just pick up and move elsewhere. And you might do a lot of the, kind of workup work that you may be losing money on, and then lose that patient when it gets to doing a procedure when you would have recouped a lot of that revenue. And so really thinking about that lifetime care journey, and not just does this technology help me, but how is it actually adding value back to our patients and providers in our community?
All right. Oh, Mehmet, do you have anything to add?
I will just say I'm going to add another layer into it. All the points are absolutely valid that these folks have been talking about. But if you want to get a use case of like the input, throughput, output on the model that Yossi started talking about, I think it's also important to understand what starting and endpoint you're looking for that throughput, right? So I'll give you an example by adding this layer. You can increase referrals. You can actually avoid rescheduling as well. Again, running a clinic on my own for 3 years, like we have seen that it's a great opportunity to look at that. But this is an ROI for one group, one person, one department. So I think ROI, what it means, kind of touches what Miki was talking about. Adoption is an important thing. You need to understand what ROI for which group and which department, right? It might be a good ROI for the scheduling and operations. It might not be a good ROI for the finance group, and I'll tell you why. You can get 1,000 people coming into the clinic, that's basically seeing doctors, but you might be only making money from the 30 people out of that, and that money you're making might be because the patients are not actually staying in the program. It might be because they're not fit for a program, and maybe their payers are not actually paying for exactly what you're trying to do for the program. So I call it, we really practice this in big scenarios with customers today. We call it, is the patient actually a good program fit? Is the patient is motivated to go through this treatment? And also, how risky and what's the equity for the patient to get them to the program? So you're kind of, these are the tools that you can enable in different flavors to understand, well, I will get the ROI because I am actually getting the funnel by just personalized to what the best outcome you can get for a single patient that will convert that into a dollar sign, which you can sustain your business because you're making money. If you look into hospital systems, the biggest problems are like that sustainability about like getting the patients, providing the care might be one problem. But again, going back to that, a CFO might look at that ROI a little bit different than chief medical officer, or for a chief medical informatics officer, like with Mickey, we'll say, well, we're spending too much money on this to get the patients in. Great. Does it work? Yeah, well, it's great. We're funneling it 40 more percent. Rescheduling and cancellations are down. Well, CFO will say we're not making money. Oh, there's something wrong. So adoption, but also what is the start point and end point for that throughput we're looking for, and making sure that all the departments are aligned with the same ROI, with the same way. I can go tell a story for an entity to say, well, this works great. We just solved this problems and we make 3x revenues for this customer. That might be a great way to send that message to one persona. The other one will knock you off on the procurement or during that process of like, I would say, solutioning. So it's very important to understand which ROI for who and when. Then you might have a better throughput in details. So
Thanks, everyone. We have one more question from the chat. Not sure if this is a subjective answer type of question, but Ross, feel free to correct me. What did you create into the tech stack? Why? And what were the outcomes? And again, anyone can just jump in and share their manifestations.
if
Yeah, I'm
nobody,
happy to.
go ahead,
Oh,
Zach.
sorry, go ahead. Oh,
No,
thanks,
no,
Matt.
I'll go after you.
Yeah, so one organization we worked with, they were looking at some of their cardiology patients and specifically heart failure, and they knew that based on some of their data and analytics that there was kind of opportunity to expand services. One of the things that we kind of created for them, historically they maybe would have opened a department, started a couple of days a week, maybe taken some of the community doctors out to dinner to try to build some relationships. And we said, let's really do it a different way. And so we used AI and analytics tools to really crunch all the patients kind of in that population that we knew about, and really did a lot of outreach, a lot of education, and basically had that clinic full from the day they opened versus, what probably would have taken them 6 months to build up that patient panel. That same approach also helped them figure out kind of staffing levels and things so that they could, appropriately service that new community. And then they were also able to kind of use that same foundation that was built to then make the decision, should they go into, another area, another part of the state, another county, et cetera. And it was a very different sort of more proactive way for them to look at rolling out a clinical service line, and also to make sure that the return was there, the volumes were there, and not have to sort of guess and react, but be able to go into it with some confidence that, was really challenging even to do 12 or 18 months ago with some of the technology and interoperability.
I will, I'll get more technical on. I hope I'm answering what Ross was looking for. So I would say from the high level, what has been working well, not only for like non-government contracts, but also like Defense Health Agency, Department of Defense with high secure like services that we are also providing. So we use Docker containers and we build microservices within those containers. So for the tech stack, we have been using Blazor for the user interface, more on the web, Xamarin for the mobile hybrid interface. That is pretty sustainable and scalable on that one. And then we have been using pretty much C# based framework also on the backend rules engine API services. And for the data science and the AI, which we build our dual large language models ourselves. We don't use wrapper AIs in our solutions mostly. So we use, starting with that is Llama, we started our models with. We use a lot of XGBoost modeling on our data science model, and then Python is the coding framework. So we just package these microservices, and then each microservice, like interoperability microservice, rules engine microservice, AI engine microservice, and the model repository services, we package them in a Docker container and we deploy it on the customer side. So when it deploys, it takes minutes. Then you just basically wire the connectivity to the EMR, backend system, ERPs, and what have you. And then the system becomes their kind of hosted solution. Think about like a lawnmower you're putting in your customer's backyard. It stays there, and they can say, we don't want your lawnmower anymore. So they can replace it whenever they want. So it also brings more AI as a service capabilities for us. So this has been working well from tech stack so far, if that is something that you were looking for, more technical aspect.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up this portion of the panel now so we can stick to our schedule. Thank you so much, Zach and Mehmet, for answering Ross's question. Ross, we hope that answered your query. I've had such a wonderful time hearing from our panelists today, and so I'm hoping to get one final piece of insight from them all. What is one actionable first step our audience can take tomorrow to start evaluating and improving their current technology setup? And please let our audience know where they can find you and your organization. We'll have Zach start us off.
Yeah, so I would say, to comment another panelist made, understand the capabilities that you already have. A lot of your enterprise platforms have rolled out tools. You've already bought things. There are things that are already in your ecosystem. Get good at that before you go out and spend a lot of money, and it's a great place to get started. And would absolutely be happy to connect with anybody else on this journey. And you can find more about me at www.pivotpointconsulting.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the insights, Zach. Mickey, final piece of advice.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of share, what Zach had to say. I mean, I think rather than look at a new tool, right, take stock of what you have, and in particular, look at how those things work together, right, and focus really on interoperability and trying to get the most out of the investment that you've already made, right? And then if you find a gap, then you will understand better what tool would fill that gap. And you can find out more about myself and J2 Interactive at www.j2interactive.com.
Thank you so much for your time, Mickey. Yossi, any final thoughts?
I think the final thing I would say is understand the problem you're trying to solve. What is a business problem you're trying to solve? And based on that, choose the right tools, the right orchestration, and the right design. Everybody can connect with me on LinkedIn, Yossi Abraham, and on Zappix, zappix.com, and we'll be happy to speak with you guys.
Thank you so much, Yossi. And to Mehmet, last and not the least, anything to add?
Yeah, I say like look for the AI like tools out there, but make sure you start with what you have. Enable a lot of tools like inside or outside of your system. AI is doing a lot of things that it can help you optimize, but I would say build a governance model for any tool, non AI or AI capabilities, set up accountability for each team member for those areas. We talked about adoption, areas of, I would say, like return of investment that you want to build it. So I would say create a steering committee, put a governance around it. So it will be able to be responsible for each department, each area, and then try to apply that framework and see if that works. If not, improve and progress on it, I would say.
All right, thank you everyone for the golden nuggets of truth for today. And with that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights today. I also want to thank everyone who attended today's panel. I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned something that will benefit the work you do on a daily basis. We have a packed few months of panels ahead of us, and I hope you will join us for them. Keep an eye on the NXUnite community platform or the NXUnite LinkedIn page to make sure you don't miss out on any of these. Better yet, go sign up now. It takes one click to RSVP once you are logged in. It has been a pleasure speaking with you all, and have a nice day and week. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.